find out what our team on the ground is doing. Simelane, hi again.
Indeed, well, more and more people are coming, more and more leaders are coming from Al Jamaa. Thank you very much for your time. State of the Nation address. What do you expect? Different environment?
No, look, the president is obviously going to lay out his plans, and his plans will inform the programs that we will have, and like you say, a different environment. But I think the president needs to take the country into his confidence that South Africa is heading for water shedding, day zeros in thousands of villages, and the African child has to compete with cattle and with dogs to get to waterways to quench their thirst. This cannot be. The president needs to tell us what he's going to do to avoid water shedding and day zeros, which will be worse than load shedding. And the country is already suffering under load shedding. Just imagine when we have water shedding, many of us will die a slow death of thirst. We are very concerned about the security of the country. Already America and Britain is looking after our borders and looking after the objectives of the war on terror in South Africa. They think that South Africa will be overrun by insurgents from Mozambique. But the problem is that on the second day of the July unrest, I told the president the country is not in safe hands, and he said, no, we are in safe hands. And later the evening he sent in 20,000 people of the Defence Force to protect the country. 3,000 people died and 300 people died, but you know, it sounds like 3,000. It was quite a massive looting exercise, and thousands of livelihoods were lost. And after that, we find that the parliament is burned down, the constitutional court was damaged, and definitely our security forces are fast asleep, and the president doesn't even trust that the city hall is safe. That's why he came to check this morning whether the security arrangements are sound for the SONA, because he wasn't going to be assassinated tonight.
Okay, Mr. Hendricks, thank you very much for time. Mr. Hendricks is a member of parliament representing Al Jamaa, basically raising critical issues of water when it comes to service delivery, water provision, the issues of energy and electricity with ESCOM implementing load shedding. All those issues, as you see people here on the red carpet, my colleague will show you the red carpet. Fashion is still the order of the day on the red carpet here. People are busy taking pictures and ensuring that they enjoy the moment also. And let me tell you that Mr. Hendricks talking about issues of security with the report of the July unrest that painted a very negative picture about security forces in the country.
Security is top of mind. I certainly have to say, when I arrived a little earlier this afternoon in one of the eNCA cars, we had to go through a drive-through section where there was actually a member of the police underneath the car doing a full sweep of the car, the entire car, before we could get anywhere near this precinct. I understand it is fairly standard, but I would imagine that security is even tighter this year. And Judith Weber, just to bring you in, security top of mind, of course, a constant reminder that we're not sitting in front of the National Assembly purely because the security was breached there for whatever motive. Absolutely shocking. Incredible damage coming on the back of the July unrest, where so many of our security and intelligence units simply failed us. It's a precarious state to be in, isn't it?
It is, Sally, and I think that as one was driving into town, you got a sense of, there was an eeriness about it because the people are absent. And imagine a country, and we don't have to imagine it because we're living in it, where the president comes to town and the roads are barricaded and there are police and people in riot gear and there are police everywhere, and where there is so much security. And it says something to us about the state of the nation. It says something to us about the threats to the state, which are real. It tells us something about the levels of instability we now have to live with. And this State of the Nation address takes place against the backdrop of the Africa Report, which was released yesterday into the insurrection in July last year. Nobody has been arrested for that. No, there have been no meaningful arrests. But the frightening part of the report was that it is in fact the timidity of the president to deal with the factionalism within his own cabinet and the factionalism within the ANC, which is actually causing an existential threat to our constitutional democracy. And so I think today there is no place for the pomp and ceremony. We look over to the City Hall and we see the place where Madiba made that speech when he was released from prison. And we have disappointed him, I dare say, by the state that our country is in. The ANC must disappoint him. And it feels as if things are extremely unstable. What we're going to need is the president to make some bold statements tonight in defense of our democracy first and foremost.
So, Sally, I was saying to you earlier on that I'm upset. Upset is an understatement. I'm peeved. There are words that I cannot repeat because they wouldn't make for family viewing. As a South African, I am extremely upset and angry about this situation. I'm seething. I read that report that you're talking about, Judith, and I read it from beginning to end. And basically the indictment is exactly that what they're calling contradictions, I'm done calling it contradictions. The nonsense, the political nonsense happening in the ANC has become a national security threat.
Yeah.
Whether you belong to the ANC or you don't, well, doesn't matter. It's a threat to you now. Not only that, the people who are entrusted with this situation are sitting on their hands, because the overall responsibility as far as that panel of experts is concerned, it places that at the doorstep of the executive. What did Cyril Ramaphosa do? Instituted a pseudo cabinet reshuffle last year, moved people around. But the people that I mentioned in this report, one of them was prancing around here in front of City Hall, with the irony lost to him that we are here because your services, the SAPS in the case of Begitele, failed. We went past Parliament making our way here. There's crime scene tape at Parliament. Crime scene tape just rolled out. And, it's very different from the measures that are usually done to sort of secure Parliament for the State of the Nation address. There's actual yellow SAPS tape. And I thought to myself, the ring of steel that is now being enforced around Parliament, yet the rest of South Africa is unsafe because the executive failed. And there were multiple failures. Don't get me started on that report.
Thulasizwe, you're absolutely right about the lack of accountability. I mean, one of the things that the Africa report also talks about is that the country is awash with lawlessness. We're awash with lawlessness and impunity. And, unless we're going to make firm commitments about the justice system, about the NPA, does what we've heard in the two Zondo reports, does that require special courts to prosecute with speed and to find the resources, no matter what, because the impunity is a threat to our democracy, of course.
Yeah.
But this very Speaker of Parliament, who today will preside over this sitting, is somebody who checked out and literally checked in somewhere else during the time of the insurrection and was removed from cabinet and then elevated to the position of Speaker. We also had the Minister of Defence and the Minister in the Presidency who were held hostage at the St. George's Hotel this year. This is a country which is in deep, deep crisis. And against that backdrop, you also have real socioeconomic crises, an unemployment rate of 35.9% at the narrow definition of employment, swathes of young people who are unemployed. And so if the President is going to come to Parliament today, here at the City Hall, without acknowledging at the very least the backdrop of crisis, and he does seem to have a knack for being preternaturally optimistic. His newsletters land almost directly from the ivory tower in our letterboxes, emails every Monday, and it seems to be skirting around the edges of the crises we face.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do it now, and if he doesn't expend his political capital now, he may not have another chance.
He's always had a reputation as a strategist. As these reports kept landing this year, it was the first part of the Zondo report, it was the SIU report, it was the second part of the Zondo report, and then it was the report into the unrest. It struck me that this is almost building up a body of evidence. Is he are the cards being stacked up for him to make these moves that we've been waiting? Or essentially should we just say it's never going to happen? This is someone who's not going to make those bold moves. What do you think?
Well, Sally, if you wanted to break glass in our moment, that was in July last year at the time of the insurrection. But, you know, your argument is the long game. Well, you're proffering that. The problem is the country doesn't have time for the long game anymore. And we are now, the president seems entirely enthralled to internal party politics and paralysed, cannot make a decision about COVID-19 lockdown. You know, we haven't had a family meeting, I hate that term, but for a long time. It seems as if the country is simply on autopilot. I wrote about this in my Daily Maverick column last week, but we can't afford to be. We can't afford to be on business as usual, talking about social compacts, about an economic stimulus package. We need to see action. And also the president's words tonight need to be backed up by money in the budget speech by eNCA.
And Judith, just before we go to a break, even if we were to give him the benefit of the doubt of this long game strategy and approach, well, it's been a long game. The high-level review panel on the security system told him in 2018, 2018 to 2022, is that not long game? By now, the non-implementation of those recommendations, and every time I have to read about the non-implementation of the high-level review panel report recommendations, I get really annoyed, because these have been acknowledged that we need to institute these changes to rebuild our security services. Guess what? This panel that has just now reported now is saying exactly the same thing that we were told in 2018. And also, very quickly, Sally, I want to add that the accountability that we need to see tonight and going forward needs to include Cyril Ramaphosa himself. He chairs the National Security Council,
which hasn't met.
Which hadn't met by the time we had the situation in July. So he can't say it was the other people that report to me. You chair the National Security Council. While they take accountability, what are you going to do to take accountability too? That structure which coordinates was not meeting to coordinate.
The police minister should have been fired in July last year.
Without a doubt.
You know, and the people who are actively in his cabinet fomenting violence and or sitting back and watching things burn. And so we have a crisis on our hands, and it can't be business as usual.
Yeah.
We can't be saying the same things every year.
Absolutely. Well, against that backdrop, it's going to be a very interesting evening indeed. Do stay with us here on eNCA.